Welcome to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Talk radio to inspire, inform, and stimulate. Bringing you enlightened discussions with authors, creatives, innovative business and health professionals, and ordinary people living extraordinary lives. Sharing their expertise and life stories. Making a difference, one word at a time. Now here's your host, Vicki St. Clair.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Well, my guest today describes himself as an author, filmmaker, speaker, and activist with a mission to help create a happy, healthy, and sustainable quality of life for America. Others who know him describe him as an icon in the industry, a constant voice of reason, a tireless and brilliant voice for work that fits the modern workforce, the real deal. He is John Graaf, a documentary filmmaker since 1977. He's made more than 40 films, authored 4 books, including Affluenza, which is described by environmentalist Bill McKibben as an American classic. John has received more than 100 regional, national, and international awards for filmmaking. And he's taught filmmaking at the University of Washington, Evergreen State College, and Boston University's Center for Digital Imaging Arts. He's just released a brand new film. It's called Town Between Two Worlds, The Gold Rushes of Nevada City, and he's joining us today for the entire hour. John Graaf, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's actually called Redefining Prosperity. The gold, that was an old name before we...
Okay, it's Redefining Prosperity. Okay, I took it off your website. I took it off your website. All right, so that makes more sense now. So I want to just share with listeners, first of all, how I first heard your name, because I was new to the area. I didn't know anyone up in Seattle, but I'd befriended somebody at college, and she went to this talent agent called Barbara Ray and asked me to go along with her. And so I went just to keep her company. And as we were leaving, Barbara said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm making a career transition because I was a senior manager in banking and I'm now writing, freelancing. And I'm thinking of going to the Washington University's documentary film program." And she said, "Do you know John Graaf?" And I said, "No, I don't know anyone." And so she gave me your name and number and said, call him and, pick his brains. And so I did. I got home that night and I called you after hours. I called the station where you were working. And you very kindly called me back first thing next morning and said, "Well, I'm really swamped right now. You're right in the middle of a production. But if you come down to KCTS, we can have coffee in the cafeteria if that works for you." And that's what we did. And I did go to University of Washington based on your feedback. So that was a long time ago.
Wow. Yeah, Barbara is that's a name from the past. I'm wondering how she's doing.
I haven't heard from her. I don't know either. So let's talk about, you've been a documentary filmmaker for public television since 1977. You were an independent in-house producer at KCTS. So how does that work if you're in-house but you're also independent?
Well, KCTS gave me a place to work, and then we worked on projects together on a contract-by-contract basis, and they would often provide some kinds of in-kind services, a little bit of camera work or editing, and I would find the cash money involved for travel, all the other kind of cash expenses that were involved. And then since I had the place and I had them as a partner, it made it easier to raise the funds.
Mm. And so had you always wanted to be a filmmaker? Because didn't you go to college for, was it sociology?
Yeah, I started in sociology, and college and I were never on the best of terms. And so I often say that my biography is a simple one. Goes like this: John Graaf left to the eternal regret of his mother. John Graaf left college before graduation to become a community organizer. In penance, he vowed to live simply, a decision reinforced by his profession as a documentary filmmaker. That kind of sums it up. So
right.
I was an activist first, and then I got into radio first in northern Minnesota, and met an old character who I thought someone should do a film about, and I ended up being the person to do that, working with some people at the University of Minnesota to do that. We gave it to public television. They liked it, aired it, won some awards, and started me in a career.
And that's been it. Have you ever, because I mean, you've been doing this over 40 years now, so have you ever thought, I'm jacking all this in and doing something different?
Well, I was always doing other things. So I never, I guess I would say that for 15 years or so, I really was doing it on a full-time basis. But after I made my most popular film, which was called Affluenza, that came out in 1997, I got a lot of requests to speak various places. I got asked by an agent to work with him in developing a book, which was then published, and I decided that I actually liked, again, the life of speaking and writing books and articles and things as much as I liked filmmaking. So I kind of reduced my filmmaking to about half-time from that point, and started doing these other things, wrote a couple of books, a lot of articles, and did a lot of public speaking, and started three somewhat less than successful organizations, but they're still going.
They're still going. I want to talk about those in a bit, but let's talk about the film first of all, because it premiered in Seattle last week, Redefining Prosperity.
Right.
And it is about Nevada City, and I lived in California for a long time. That was my introduction to living in America, and I always thought Nevada City was this kind of grungy old gold mining town that was like semi-abandoned. But when I saw your film, I came away thinking, I'd like to go check that place out. So tell us, when you first went to Nevada City, how you got involved in doing this, why you wanted to make the film.
Well, actually, I'm somewhat embarrassed to say this, but they have a film festival there in Nevada City that some years ago named an award for me.
That's right.
And brought me down to present the award each year to the filmmaker that was getting the award. And in the course of doing that, I've probably been there now 8 or 9 times to this festival. I came to know the town, to know the people, and just was amazingly impressed by what a group of people they are, how engaged they are in their community, and what brought them together across some pretty serious political and other divides. And that's the subject, in a way, of the film. It was the fight to save a beautiful river, the Yuba, from power dams, and a 16-year struggle that brought people together.
Right. And you look at some of the history of the city itself and how it grew and how it changed from gold mining to logging to then the hippies came in and now it's trying to be a very self-sustainable city. I left with a feeling of hope, if you will, that we don't all have to buy into this crass commercialism that we're surrounded by. What are your feelings about the city itself?
Well, I think it is a hopeful story, and I think it does attract people who like to be engaged in the community, who like the easy access to nature that is around there. And it is a beautiful town. I mean, it was the town you're describing, the sort of grungy, falling into disrepair, old gold rush town in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And then some people sort of discovered it and said, well, number one, this could be a tourist town. We could fix it in ways that would attract people to come here because it has all these beautiful buildings from the gold rush days. And then secondly, the hippies, or the Back to the Land movement, arrived in the area, kind of led by a famous poet, Gary Snyder. And they had other ideas about, making a place really create a sense of community and a place where people would want to stay, and to create some alternative institutions, both organic farming, progressive education, things of that sort. And so you had for some time, probably 15 years or more, an uneasy tension between the older residents, sometimes referred to as the rednecks or the,
right.
the locals, and the new residents referred to as the hippies. And that was sometimes they threw rocks at each other. I mean, there was not a lot of love there. But when that river was threatened in 1983, they came together because both factions of the community really loved that place. And they spent 16 years and eventually got protection for that river permanently. And now the community is works together. They don't always agree on everything, but they work together on a lot of things.
Yeah, it's amazing what people can do when they do pull together. I think I heard you say at the premiere that there's another. Was it Vallejo? There's another city that is looking at doing a similar kind of thing.
Well, they call it Vallejo actually, but it is, I guess in Spanish it would be Vallejo, but Vallejo, California is a wonderful town. It's the opposite of Nevada City. Nevada City is very small. It's not diverse. It's a town of young people and old people. Vallejo, on the other hand, is a very gritty, very diverse, large city of about 150,000 people. It's a port at the north end of San Francisco Bay that was the home to the U.S. Navy's shipbuilding during World War II and to the Navy somewhat afterwards, until the Navy pulled out in the late 90s and left the town, an economic disaster area in some ways, and went into bankruptcy, a lot of crime, a lot of drugs, other kinds of things. But Vallejo is coming back to life, and part of the way they're doing that is in a campaign to make their city beautiful and to attract artists and to attract creatives and to really bring nature into the city by restoring wetlands, reforesting neighborhoods, creating new parks, preserving open space. They have an activity called, an annual festival called Visions of the Wild, about nature in the city, to get their kids involved in that. And I've been really impressed by what Vallejo is trying to do, and find it a wonderful place. But it's a tough place. I mean, it's not the first place people would think of when you talk about a beautiful city.
Right. Seattle has grown so much over the last 20 years since I've lived here. I mean, when I first moved here, it was, don't tell people you came from California, Vicki. but now we meet people from all over.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And do you think we've obviously lost that small sense of community? Do you think it's too late to recapture some of it, or is it really dependent upon small pockets within the community, within the larger community?
Well, probably small pockets in the case of Seattle. I don't see us recovering that too much unless we find some way to slow the growth. And, I don't know exactly how to do that, but the one thing I don't think we should be doing is giving tax breaks and various things to encourage more growth. I think we're plenty rich enough, and many of our problems, including homelessness and other kinds of things, are the result of too much money than too little.
Right. And I know that you're about looking for wealth in other areas than just cash value. So we'll dive into some of the activism work you've done. We need to take a quick break first. My guest is filmmaker John de Graaf. His new film is called Redefining Prosperity. And you're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Please do stay with us. We'll be right back.
Parkinson's disease affects as many as 1 million people in the United States. At the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, it's our mission to beat this disease. To learn about the Parkinson's Disease Foundation, or if you want to help support our work, visit our website, pdf.org, or call us at 800-457-6676. In the Northwest, contact the Northwest Parkinson's Foundation at nwpf.org.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn to spot a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. I'm Paul George. Spot a stroke fast. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Kathy Cooper, and every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m., I'll be hosting Lost and Found. We'll be discussing all types of losses, but it's not going to be the doom and gloom hour. It'll be an hour of education, support, validation, and yes, we will have a little bit of humor. So won't you join me Wednesdays, 1 to 2 p.m., Lost and Found, because every loss matters, and through every loss, something can be found.
Next week on Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, award-winning Seattle filmmaker, author, speaker, and activist John Graaf. An icon in the documentary film industry, John Graaf has written and produced more than 40 films and authored 3 books, including the highly acclaimed Affluenza. His latest film, Torn Between Two Worlds, explores a thriving California city striving to be a fully self-sustainable community. Tune in Mondays at noon Pacific Time and Fridays at 6 a.m. Catch up on podcasts at conversationslive.net.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and then flame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
Get inspired every hour right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
Like the sands of Nevada, they go drifting.
And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. My guest today is John Graaf, a Seattle filmmaker, author, speaker, and activist. His new film just came out. It's called Redefining Prosperity. And John, I wanted to dive a little into some of the activism work that you do, because even though you are a filmmaker, you're an author and speaker, activist, it's all integrated to some extent. And I read that Kathy O'Keefe, who's a faculty of University of South Alabama, said that your activism, John's activism, springs from the ideals and passion of John Muir. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, I think it's a very fair statement. Muir was my hero growing up, and I think it all came from the fact, I've written about this, that my father, I grew up in San Francisco, and my father took me backpacking to Yosemite when I was very young. And by the time I was of high school age, my best friend and I were allowed to go to Yosemite in the Sierra for 4 to 6 weeks in the summer on our own, and just backpack and hitchhike to get food and do those kind of things. And so I think I learned a lot of lessons. And in the meantime, of course, we read a lot of John Muir. He was our passion, and John Muir still influences me. I think John Muir was somebody who was all about quality of life and beauty and things of that sort, and that's what mattered to him, not a lot of stuff.
Right.
And that's always influenced me and still does. Right.
You've said that I believe that all of us must work actively for justice and sustainability. A lot of people don't feel responsible for that. Do you think we should take more responsibility?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a scold or a preacher about this, but yeah, I mean, I think that the fact is that things are not getting better in this country, and all of the anger and polarization reflects that, and I think we have serious problems on our hand, the most important, of course, of which is global warming, which might get us all if we don't start to do something about it. I was really impressed by this 15-year-old Swedish girl who recently addressed the United Nations, saying, hey, if you adults won't do it, then we kids are going to have to take the lead. So that and the growing inequality in our country, which is just, to me, completely out of hand, I think that's behind how angry we are and the level of our discourse and hostility and polarization that exists here, something which I'm trying to change.
It amazes me that, given that many of our policymakers have children and have grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, that they're not looking forward as far as they need to think. I mean, I have 13 nephews and nieces, and I wonder what it's going to be like for them in 15, 20, 30 years. So I agree with you. We have a responsibility to do our part. I just want to share some of the activism you've been involved in with our listeners. You were co-founder and president of Take Back Your Time, co-founder of the Happiness Alliance, former policy director of the Simplicity Forum, founder of Make America Beautiful Again, senior advisor to Earth Economics, board member of Earth Island Institute, advisor to the government of Bhutan in 2013, and in 2017 you were advisor. This made me laugh. I was thinking of Harry Potter. Advisor to the Happiness Ministry of the United Arab Emirates. And I share that because everyone that I've heard talk about you says John de Graaf is one of the busiest people I know, and yet you still have time to do your part here. So I wanted to talk about taking back your time, because I know that's a big thing that you've been involved in. And I saw in 2014 you wrote an article about an op-ed for New York Times, and I can't see that things have improved. I actually think they've got a lot worse since then. But you write, it's not by accident that the United States has been called the no-vacation nation, and our vacations are amongst the shortest in the world. Tell us what you have to say about this.
Well, I've been working on this issue for quite some time. And when we started the Take Back Your Time campaign, which is about, trying to deal with the overworked and overbusy society that we see ourselves in the United States, we didn't know what the facts were. And we started digging in and looking about, is it like this everywhere? And one thing we discovered was that the United States now, along with about 4 other very tiny and poor countries, are the only countries in the world that don't require paid vacation time for all of their workers.
Yeah, stop there a minute, because that's really unbelievable, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're the United States and 4 other countries.
That's it. And they're all small, in Nepal, Burma, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to absorb that for a minute. I mean, really, because we're the largest, supposed to be the leader and the wealthiest, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, if you live in Europe today, you start out after a year on the job with 4 weeks of paid vacation, no matter who you are. That's the law. And most people get 5, 6, and sometimes my French cousin gets 8. I think people there are just aghast. They can't believe. I've talked to Rick Steves about this, the travel writer.
Right,
he says,
right.
Europeans just think we're crazy, that
they
we
do.
don't relax. We don't take time off. The Australians get 30 days. The Brazilians get 30 days. People in Togo get 30 days. I mean, it's quite stunning that this rich country cannot, that we have 25% of Americans, maybe even a few more, that get 0 paid vacation time. And the average in this country is less than 2 weeks. And that's stunning, I think.
And maybe even more stunning is that of those who do get paid vacation, a large percentage of them don't actually take it.
Well, that's mostly the people who do get quite a bit, who don't take it all. I mean, the people at the bottom do take it. And but yes, it's true that if you average everything out, Americans give back something like 3 or 4 days per person of vacation time that they actually have coming. They don't take it.
According to projecttimeoff.org, we actually last year in 2017 forfeited 212 million days, which is equivalent to $62.2 billion in lost benefits.
Right.
And they say that had Americans used our vacation time, it would have actually generated 1.9 million jobs.
That's probably true, because the tourist industry is the largest overall industry in the country and perhaps in the world. And so jobs are definitely generated by this. I think Washington State, we see that, and it's one of the things we've used as an argument to try to win a paid vacation law here in Washington State. We've done that a couple times in the legislature. So far, no luck, but we're not stopping.
Right. And study after study shows that we all benefit from time off. Our brains need to de-stress. I unplug frequently, much to the annoyance of people around me because they can't reach me for 24 hours. But come on, none of us are that important, right?
well, it just drives so much impatience and lack of attention span and all of those kind of things. So I think you're absolutely right to do that. And I think we need to, we're just behind the whole world in this. Washington State, I am very happy to report, just next on January is going to be starting as the best state in the United States in terms of paid family leave, with 3 months of essentially full paid leave, and people can even take a 4th month and shared by parents and stuff. That's a real important step forward, because we are the only country in the world, except Papua New Guinea, that doesn't guarantee at least paid maternity leave for mothers when they have a baby.
That's staggering. Well, I want to talk about something else you've been involved in, and that's making America beautiful again. But we'll take a break so we don't have to interrupt on that. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. My guest is John de Graaf. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Great.
Do something different with your spare time. Give baby animals at Paws a fresh start. With the assistance of caring volunteers, Paws helps hundreds of orphaned and sick kittens and puppies each year. Join us and save lives. Become a Paws foster care volunteer. For more information, visit paws.org or 425-787-2500. paws.org or 425-787-2500.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything. I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor. If making my detox public is gonna help somebody, I'm all for it. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. A message from Truth, the Ad Council, and ONDCP.
Are you ready for something real, raw, upfront, and honest? Then tune in each Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here for Love from the Hip. I am spiritual hypnotherapist, master esthetician, and the host, Sakura Sutter. This show is unlike anything you have ever heard and was created to help others to help themselves. Hear me follow up with guests I have hypnotized and see how it has improved their lives. I will also spotlight amazing people from around the world, their skin tips, live readings, and answers to life's burning questions. Join us each Wednesday at 2 p.m.
Let's see if I guess that this just isn't working.
Knowing you have a great idea for a book is one thing, writing it another. So what's stopping you? Maybe you can't find time. Maybe you don't know where to begin. Maybe you wrote a couple of chapters, then disappeared down a rabbit hole. Or maybe you'd rather someone else write it for you. Partnering with the right coach or ghostwriter can make all the difference between talking about your book and finishing your book. As an award-winning writer and strategic consultant, Vicki St. Clair's storytelling credits span from business, health, self-help, and memoir to New York Times and USA Today best-selling anthologies. Vicki partners with people just like you at the exact level you need, whether you need a little encouragement, editorial guidance, or full-blown ghostwriting and consulting services. If you're serious about telling the story you know is inside you, stop procrastinating. Let's get your story down on paper. Contact Vicki today. Email Vicki at VickiSt.Clair.com or call 1-800-495-7617. See more about Vicki and her work at VickiSt.Clair.com.
Yeah, that could work.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Inspiring, innovative, and a great place to advertise. Learn more at conversationslive.net.
Going our own way every day. Alternative Talk 1150.
And welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. My guest is John de Graaf. He's an author, filmmaker, speaker, and activist with a mission to help create a happy, healthy, and sustainable quality of life for America, which leads me into my next question, John. I want to learn a little bit more about your project. I think it's a foundation, Make America Beautiful Again. You say you changed the name at some point on that. So let's talk a little bit about what was the premise behind that and what's happening.
Well, I was troubled by how polarized we'd become as a country, and I was looking for some way, and I'd both had the story of Nevada City, where people came together to save a beautiful river, so that led me to believe that beauty might be something that could bring us together. And then I was reading a statement by Doug Tompkins, who is the founder of the Esprit and North Face clothing giants, and he said, if anything can save the world, I'd put my money on beauty, which he did. He sold the companies and bought an enormous amount of wild land in South America, which is now a huge national park. But anyway, I thought someone should test that. I think maybe he's got something there. So originally I called the idea Make America Beautiful Again. People liked the idea, but not the name. And they said either if they were pro-Trump, they said they thought it was slighting Trump, or if they were anti-Trump, they thought it reminded them of Trump. So either way, they didn't like it. And so we came up together actually with a couple of focus groups with the name And Beauty for All. And that's our website, andbeautyforall.org. The idea is that, and was originally, we were going to be Beauty for All, but that's L'Oreal's slogan, so we couldn't.
That's right.
We couldn't use that, so it's And Beauty for All, Liberty, Justice, and Beauty for All. And I think people liked that name. Some people see it in some ways as another way of saying environmental justice. The environmental part being the beauty of nature, the beauty of good urban surroundings that encourage people to walk and talk and not drive everywhere. And the for all, meaning that everyone ought to have a right to the beauty in the country, no matter who they are, how poor they are, and so forth. So I've been working on that with that name now for a little over a year and a half, and it's gone slowly because people have been very busy these days, but I think it's starting to pick up steam, and I've had some nice recent conversations about it, of course, with the city of Vallejo, but also I spoke to the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts recently in San Diego, and these are all rural folks for the most part who do land use, and they completely crossed the political spectrum and got a good response there, and then also have started to reach out and publish a little bit in conservative publications about this and find that it is an issue that appeals across the political spectrum.
Right. And so what's your long-term hope on that, your long-term desire for that?
Well, my desire is that we do some of the things that I care about anyway, which is protect and restore the environment. I think we ought to do instead of digging more coal, for example, out of West Virginia and Kentucky and all those places, we ought to be putting people to work restoring those cut-off mountaintops and replanting them so that they become beautiful again and they become life-giving and people can stay there in their communities and work. But I also think we need to redesign cities so that they are like many of the cities that I see in Europe. They're walkable, they're lovely, they have lots of greenery and parks, and encourage people to get out of their cars. I had a great visit with the director of transportation for Vienna, who said that they'd really designed their metro system around beauty, and doing so increased ridership tremendously, and people were less stressed. They got out of their cars. They put a lot of greenery and places to walk between the metro stations, separate from busy streets. People were willing to walk 3-4 times as far. So I'm thinking we can be inspired to make some of these kinds of changes in our community. And we have a history of doing this.
Right, right. I have a friend who moved back from New York, and of course they walk and subway everywhere there. And she lived in Seattle for a while and just couldn't stand the traffic and the congestion and having to get in her car just to go to the grocery store. So she spent a considerable amount of time trying to find a city where she could move and walk like she could in New York. I don't know that she found the ideal situation, but she did eventually move because I think it's important to a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It is good for our health. It's good for happiness for sure. Interestingly enough, 2 recent surveys, one by Gallup and the other by the University of South Carolina Upstate, it's called, which is in Greenville, Spartanburg, South Carolina, have found that a city being beautiful and being perceived as it by its inhabitants as beautiful ranks right there at the top in terms of what makes people want to stay in a place, and also in terms of who are the most satisfied folks with their lives in those cities. So.
Right. I have to say, when I left San Diego, and I did want to leave after 13 years, almost 14 years there, it was really hard to find somewhere else that I found pretty in comparison, because it was so pretty down there, very beautiful. And every time I'd fly somewhere else and I'd come back, I'd just think, how can I leave it? It's so pretty.
It is lovely. Yeah, no, it is lovely. And I mean, I think there are beautiful places, and we can make places more beautiful. I tend to, spend time in Europe, and I love the small towns and the cities in Europe where my relatives live and other things, because there is a lot of attention paid to making them beautiful and making them walkable and making them places where there are tables and benches so people will come together and talk to each other, and there are plazas and we try to do that here. 100 years ago, we had a whole movement in all around the country. It was responsible for for what beautiful parkways and some of the parks and the greens places and stuff we have in Seattle. It was called the City Beautiful movement, and it did a lot. And the whole ideas were cities should be civic places where people come together, and they should have a lot of beauty and a lot of greenery, because we know now from study after study after study that having green around and having nature around is good for our health and our happiness.
Mm-hmm. It keeps me sane. I spend a lot of time in nature, I must say, and that's my sanity thing. And if, I experienced a great deal of burnout this year, and I'm still kind of recovering from it, but I find that if I can get out in nature for at least an hour a day and just do nothing, I walk with my dog, it's so valuable. And even if I'm, like, sometimes I need to be by water, the water is just meditative and
absolutely
causes a lot of stress to fall away. So let's talk about happiness, because we've talked about happiness on the show with various people who've traveled and explored and looked at studies on this, and I know this is part of your mission too. What do you think? What are you working on in that vein that fits in with this package?
Well, right now it's beauty, which I think is a very underrated aspect of happiness. I did have the opportunity of speaking at a number of international conferences when I was working in the Take Back Your Time campaign. I was invited to speak to these conferences on happiness because time balance and not being stressed out by time is one thing that happiness researchers recognize is important for happiness. And the little country of Bhutan, which I was invited to spend some time as an advisor to the government some time back, really believes that time balance is an important part of their 9 domains, as they call them, of happiness. And so these things are what you'd expect: social connection, education, social support, nature, and good government, transparent, democratic government are things that matter for happiness. It's not just about money. That's what these countries know, that having the highest GDP doesn't guarantee anything. We have to have these other things. The one thing I think, though, hasn't been looked at enough is beauty, and I think we're starting to do that. And these new surveys are showing that access to and living in beautiful surroundings is hugely important for how happy we are with our lives.
Right.
And it's something that we can do that isn't just a private purchase. It's something we can do as a society to make available for everyone and bring us together in that way.
Right. I remember interviewing, I'm going to butcher his name, but I think it was Ben Tal-Shar, who's a professor he taught classes at Harvard, and he's Israeli, and so he teaches also in Israel, and he was in Israel when we spoke, and his class on happiness was the #1 class ever at Harvard University. It was literally sold out. Yeah, he couldn't get everybody in there, though. So it doesn't matter what age people are. There's this.
That's been the
there's
case
a gap.
also at Princeton and Stanford and other schools that have done that.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break, and I want to dive into a whole other area here when we come back. So much to talk about here. My guest is John de Graaf, filmmaker, author, speaker, and activist, and you're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair.
Next week on Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, award-winning Seattle filmmaker, author, speaker, and activist John DeGraaf. An icon in the documentary film industry, John DeGraaf has written and produced more than 40 films and authored 3 books, including the highly acclaimed Affluenza. His latest film, Torn Between Two Worlds, explores a thriving California city striving to be a fully self-sustainable community. Tune in Mondays at noon Pacific Time and Fridays at 6 a.m. Catch up on podcasts at conversationslive.net.
This is Martha Norwalk, every Sunday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Thanks in part to Best Practitioner Dr. Nels Rasmussen, we cover the world of animals. This week, December 16th, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me. As an animal behavior therapist and trainer, I'd love to hear from you with any questions you have about behavior training or healing, and you can also call in about any animal-related issue or cause you'd like to talk about. Open phone lines throughout the show. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything. I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor. If making my detox public is gonna help somebody, I'm all for it. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. A message from Truth, the Ad Council, and ONDCP.
At Sundown Communications, we find that most of our clients are brilliant at what they do, but they lack the time and resources to write and create business messaging that delivers results. That's where we come in, providing a diverse range of professional copywriting services for fresh strategic web content, PR, advertising and promotion, marketing, speeches, and much more. Call us today so you can focus on what you do best, and we'll do the rest. Call 800-495-7617. That's 800-495-7617.
Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair. Innovative business leaders know to advertise here. Learn how affordable it is at conversationslive.net.
Alternative Talk 1150. It's good for what ails you. This statement has not been evaluated by the FDA.
And welcome back, everyone. I am talking with John DeGraaf. He's here in the studio with us today. His new film, Redefining Prosperity, just premiered. And John, I want to ask you before I forget, I read that you were writing your memoir. You've got such a huge body of work. I mean, lots to write about. Is that finished?
No, it's not finished. It's actually nearly finished. It's nearly finished. I keep having trouble with the last chapter, so it's been nearly finished now for a number of years.
Right, right.
But things don't slow down, and I'm still doing lots of things, and so there's sort of no conclusion yet.
Well, it's good, I think, that you're still doing stuff rather than just writing about what you did do. When you look...
Mostly about what other people did. I mean, it's a lot of it's the stories of people that I met and whose stories I told in my films.
Okay. So when you look back at your body of work, I mean, people are always impressed by it, I think. Does it feel impressive to you? Do you look back and think, wow, I did all that stuff? Or how do you feel about it?
You know, yeah, it does, actually. I'm kind of surprised and pleased and feel good about it. I think, you know, you always wish you'd done something else, this or that at the same time, but we have to get over that to a degree. We have to understand when enough is enough, and
right.
and not be so hard on ourselves, because I think we are. I think we're just in such a competitive society and stuff that we just judge ourselves and being kind of constantly productive, and there's something wrong with that.
Right. There's so much emphasis today put on having your personal brand, building your personal brand. Is that something you've ever worried about, been concerned about?
I don't think so. I mean, I've had to worry about it a little bit just in order to attract support for my shows and to fundraise. You know, I've had to build up the resume a little bit and present myself as the one capable of doing this. But it's certainly not something that I enjoy.
Right, right. So let's talk about storytelling. A couple of questions that I had come in from people when they knew you were coming here. But I want to talk about storytelling first because, we're always told story has to have beginning, middle, and end, true. But I think when you're writing, and that's true whether you're writing film or script, whatever, but when you're making a non-fiction film, it's not that simple. There has to be more to it than that. And one of the things that I think you do extraordinarily well is pick characters to tell your story. We'll use the latest one, Redefining Prosperity, as an example. So what considerations go into your film so that you feel you have a good story here and not just a series of interviews?
Well, I think that is the important thing, is kind of thinking about, overall what this story is. I also like the idea of metaphor. I think it's a good way to tell stories and have them stick with people. So my most popular documentary by far was Affluenza, which is obviously a sort of humorous metaphor for a society that's got a virus of overconsumption.
Right.
And doing that allowed me to create the story in a way in which I could look at the symptoms of this supposed dread disease, the epidemiology or history of the disease, and then later some of the things you could do about it, the cures or treatment. So there was a structure there. With Nevada City, the metaphor I used was the idea of what is wealth, and that Nevada City was the home to different gold rushes, but the point was people had a different idea of what gold was. So the first one was the real gold rush of the 1850s, in which the land was desecrated, the native people were either killed or driven away. Things were, it was all about money, about greed, about that kind of gold. Now, the second gold rush, as I saw it, was when the Back to the Landers came in the late 60s and 70s. And their idea of gold or wealth was a sense of community, a place with nature and beauty, a sense of connection as they looked at it, what they call bioregionalism. And that's a different idea of gold. And now there's a third gold rush, and that in California, and it's kind of green gold, it's marijuana. And the question is, where that's going to go in a place like Nevada City. Will it be like the original gold rush, in which the environment is desecrated and everybody's just out to make money on pot? Or will it be a thing where it's a sustainable and smart industry that helps people and helps the environment? And we don't know yet.
Right, right. And you had such great characters tell the story in that film. It was the lady who was the former mayor of Nevada City, and she was the first female to walk across Alaska solo.
Mm-hmm.
You had a great quote here that I loved. I just wanted to share because it kind of sums it all up, really. Community stewardship can happen anywhere. It just comes from loving a place enough to take care of it.
Yeah, and I think that's the way a lot of people there feel. That quote is from Caleb Dardick, who was he grew up in the local counterculture. He was a kid. His parents moved. From Missouri. They lived in suburban St. Louis. They moved out to Nevada City. They didn't know what they were doing. They bought land there and cleared it, and they were suburbans without these rural skills. But they learned these things, and his life growing up in that community was a marvelous one, of where people helped each other and took care of each other, and he carried that over, that sense of working together, into the struggle to save the Yuba River and to work together with people that they didn't always agree with.
Right, right. So I have a question from a listener up in Canada. He's up in the Toronto area, but he's in BC right now, and he does work in film. And he said, how have you managed to sustain a career for as long as you have in a creative field that's very competitive and also not known for paying very well? He's struggling right now.
Well, it's been up and down, absolutely. And it took me a while before I could do documentary making as a full-time job. And then it was very up and down. So you have to live simply. You have to reduce your wants in a material sense, I think. And then, there was a time in my life where I got paid pretty well. And it was a period when the kind of work I was doing was really rewarded well, and I was able to get a lot of good grants from big foundations like Rockefeller and Ford and Pew, and put some of that away if I could. after the crash in 2008, that ended. And it's been very difficult, I will say, since that time. And so I've had to put together earning a little bit here and there from honorariums from speaking, earning something a little bit from writing, from the books that I have written. Affluenza is a book sold well. My book, What's the Economy for Anyway, that I did with Dave Batker, a local economist here. We did pretty well on that book, and so it's catch as catch can. But I don't regret it, but I have to say that it wasn't. Sometimes it was easy, and sometimes it was everything but.
Right, right. And I think these days, people out by themselves as independent creatives, whatever field they're in, very rarely have one title to their job description anymore. It's like you take it from wherever it comes, basically.
Well, and one thing, for instance, was being at the right time in certain things. When my wife and I bought our home, it was affordable to us. We could never buy the same place today. We just happened to get it 20 plus years ago. And I think that's what a lot of young people now are just facing a situation. Number one, they come out of school with enormous debts. And number two, they are facing a housing market that's absolutely obscenely high, and inflation and all kinds of things. So I don't know how they can do it.
Right.
And I feel for them.
Yeah, very hard. So outside of your work and outside of, looking for beauty, what inspires you creatively? What gets your juices going creatively?
Well, I like to read, and I like to read novels and stories and things, and I love history, so I'm always fascinated. Right now, I'm sort of obsessed with the the period in American history between about 1893 and 1920. I think it was the most fruitful, fascinating time in our history in which every kind of new idea and movement flourished. So I mentioned City Beautiful before, but there was also progressive education and what was called nature study, the arts and crafts movement, the country life movement, the conservation movement where we got our national forests and parks, the progressive movement where the rise of organized labor, the fight for pure food and drugs.
Right.
Everything amazing and fascinating in our history, I think, came together at one time. The right to vote for women all over the country. All of these things were happening in that period, which starts for me with the authorship in 1893 of the song America the Beautiful, which to me really is a song that we don't understand, and it ought to be our national anthem, because it really says that, what it says is that we live in a beautiful country, and it's really important that we make our institutions and the way we treat each other equal to the beauty of the country, and that we care about those kind of things. And I think it was the beginning of a critique of the Gilded Age that had come from the 1870s up to that time, where all of the obsession was on making money, on the rise of banking and oil and steel and so forth. It was a counter to that. America, America, may God thy gold refine, the song said. So thinking in different terms. And I think that was what that whole period, up until World War I ended it, was all about.
Yeah, I love that you said that about the song America the Beautiful, because it's a song that I can't listen to without crying. I remember standing in Disneyland hearing it for the first time and flooding with tears. It's a very powerful song, and to me that was America.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was written, incidentally, by a woman who was an open lesbian. She lived with her partner, which in 1893 was kind of seen as scandalous.
Right, right.
She was also, she called herself a Christian socialist. She was not some hyper, patriotic person that we might think. And the song is really a call to America, to our better angels, and not to the kind of stuff we've seen in this country lately.
Right, right. What's the best career advice you received when you were a few years back? What's the best and what's the worst?
Oh my! I think that's a hard one. I don't know that I got.
Quick.
I don't know that I got too much career advice.
No, you just figured it out as you went along.
It was a calling for me. I couldn't do anything else, and so I did what I did.
That's perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, you're certainly a testament to following your calling, John de Graaf. It's been such a pleasure having you in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you.
You can find out about John de Graaf and his extensive body of work at his website, johndegraaf.com. And we're right at the end of our show. I ran over a little, so thank you for being with us. You can find me at info@conversationslive.net and 800-495-7617. If you have questions or comments. We'll see you next week. Until then, live well, live strong.
Radio is very competitive. Shows soar in popularity and inflame out. Sometimes, however, a real connection is made with an audience, and success blooms year after year. For over a decade, Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair has built a loyal following thanks to inspiring and stimulating conversation. Longevity, loyalty, exclusivity. Smart advertisers seek it out. With Vicki's valuable audience, the search is over. Discover the affordable, effective ways to advertise your business. Log on to conversationslive.net. That's conversationslive.net today.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of KKNW, its management, or other advertisers. Contests are the responsibility of the host of this program and not KKNW. This is Alternative Talk 1150 AM, KKNW Seattle, and KNUC 98.9 HD3 Seattle.